So many moms feel stuck and isolated, like they've got to keep it all together and can't say how hard it really is. On Let's Get Real, we talk about the real stuff, motherhood, mental health, and everything in between, so you don't feel like you have to carry it alone anymore. Because in order to heal, we have to get real. If you're feeling overwhelmed, grab the Overwhelmed Mom's Guide. It's totally free and made to help you feel like yourself again. The link is in the show notes. Let's jump in. So many adults move through life not realizing how much of who they are, their reactions, their fears, and their parenting began long before they ever had the words for it. Childhood experiences don't stay in childhood. They follow us into adulthood, affecting the way that we parent, love the people in our lives, and how we handle stress. When we don't talk about what shaped us, those patterns often repeat in the next generation. Today, we're joined by Stacy Schaffer, a licensed professional counselor with over 20 years of experience supporting children, teens, and young adults. She's also the author of With Love from a Children's Therapist. Stacy brings a rare dual perspective as both a survivor of childhood trauma and a clinician who had spent decades helping young people feel truly seen, safe, and understood. Her work weaves personal resilience, therapeutic insight, and the belief that healing is possible, even after the hardest beginnings. Stacy, thank you so much for being here today. I'm really looking forward to jumping into the topic of how our childhood experiences, they don't just stay in childhood. So I'm really glad that you do the work you do, and I can't wait to get going on this conversation.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited too.
Great. Well, as we get started, can you share a little bit of story with what your childhood was like and how that shaped the work that you do today?
It wasn't good, Jenna. It wasn't good. Yeah. So, I was born to a single mom. They divorced when I was a couple months old. And my mom, I believe, because of undealt with issues in her own childhood, that shaped everything that I experienced, honestly. Because I first experienced trauma when I was around 3, and I tried to talk to her. She couldn't hear it, and I believe that's because of this wall that she had a pretty significant thing happen to her that she never talked about until later, until I was the only one that knew about it at 10, which is super appropriate. But and so had just a string of traumatic experiences. I can get into if you want, but I outline that in my book, what those experiences were. And then my mom died when I was newly 22. And I had already begun to start to plan to go to grad school to be a therapist, because let's help other people instead. Sure, let's do that. And so not realizing that how I tried to put everything behind that wasn't really going to work long term. It did in the moment, it got me to where I wanted to be. And so it wasn't until about a decade ago that I started unraveling some of the deeper part of my story, because I specialize in grief, and it's not hard to talk about my mom's death, but the stuff that I didn't talk about, that's the meat.
Yes. And what were some of the ways that you tried to leave it behind? Was it by being like, hey, I'm going to the helping profession, so I don't have to talk about my stuff. I get to help others with theirs. Or was it other ways that took shape?
Yes. And also, there was a pretty significant time when I was 11 that I was sent away. It was back in the day when they thought that you could go to care centers and pay to have someone kidnap you in the middle of the night.
Oh, yeah.
It seems cool. Yeah. And so my mom's thing was that she was dying of breast cancer, and that it would be a great place for me to heal from previous trauma. Spoiler alert. And so when I returned from Utah, I'm from Vegas, which is fault. That's not my fault. Let's just be clear. When I returned home from Utah, it was an exact moment that I can point to, that I was at my front door, finally coming from the worst trauma of my life. That year was the absolute worst year of my life. I was at the door and I was like, this is now. Start over. And so when I was in high school, I didn't reference anything that happened in my childhood. Didn't go there, because I was like, I can just start over, and that we can build a life from right now. And so it was perfection and grades and being outgoing and all those kind of things that served me until it didn't.
served you until it didn't. That's huge. And I appreciate you bringing that example, because I think that's such a mindset so many of us have, or this thought of like, it's too big, it's too painful. A lot of times we were left on our own to try to carry all of that. There was no adult or someone to enter in and help us carry the pain. So we're like, we have no idea what to do. So the best thing we can come up with is just dodge it, get out of here, run as far away as possible. But we don't realize how so many of the ways we cope, or the things that we try to do moving forward, it stems from those painful things, such as, like I heard you say, the perfectionism and the performing and the trying to get these good grades or whatever it is. So I'm curious, how would you define childhood trauma for someone listening? They haven't really gone through and done their own work. So how would you define childhood trauma, and what are some of those additional ways it shows up in adulthood?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a big spectrum, right, of like childhood trauma. Frankly, it's another issue entirely, but I believe that our kids are getting traumatized by going to school because of the school violence problem in America. I feel like that falls on there. That's traumatic, lockdown drills, and all of that. Without getting, I feel like that is creating what I'm seeing, a lot of anxiety in kids. So I would say, I mean, the childhood trauma, like events that significantly impact the way one perceives the world. That it's like, I had like long-term, like childhood trauma, but that doesn't negate the people who've had like an incident that is it's pretty traumatic, because your nervous system doesn't have a comparison system with you. Mine's not like, well, Jenna's, it is unique to you. And so it's like how it lands in your body.
Right. That's really good. And then how do you see some of that show up in adults that you've worked with, or just, I don't know, people you know, and you're like, okay, this is probably coming from somewhere.
I think it comes out sideways. I tell kids a lot, like, here's the thing. If there's something that you're ashamed about and you don't want to talk about, it's kind of like you take food to your room. And then you kind of forget about some of the remainder of the food because you don't finish. It's fine. You throw clothes over it. It starts to smell, and you further clothes. And then, like, by the time you try to get it out, the scent remains. You can fix that eventually, but it creates a bigger issue. And so I think that's that happens a lot. I think sometimes parents, because I believe that especially parents bringing their kids to counseling, are doing the very best they possibly can to do right by their child, but they don't always have the tools because they didn't have a great childhood. And so I feel like, generational trauma, it just happens and happens over and over. And I mean, that is very true in my own story. Had my mom, she had a very significant thing happen to her. I went to court when I was 10, testified like an abuse case that happened to me. And my mom thought it would be a good idea in the parking lot to tell me, I didn't know how you feel because this thing happened to me. Because, we needed some parenting support. But I think that had my mom gotten support for that, but obviously that was like, the 50s, 60s. Had she gotten support for that, the trajectory of my life would have changed forever. It would not, the things that I endured at 3 would have stopped. Thus, not creating the ripple effect of things that would ultimately happen to me. Would it mean that I'd have an easy life? Absolutely not, because you've been outside. Yeah. But I think that I would not have suffered had my mom had the support she deserved.
Right. And can you speak a little more to that, why you think that is? Because I have like flashes of thoughts going through my mind of possibilities as to why that would be, right? So here's kind of what I'm thinking, but I would love to hear you expand on this. I'm thinking, okay, if she did her own work, had the support she needed to work through those things, it's almost like there could be this great paying attention and naming these things and noticing patterns, or noticing like, hey, this isn't healthy or okay, and I need to speak up, and noticing that in her own child and being like, hey, I know now what to do to step in, or I know how to speak up, or like, why do I feel like I have to be silenced? And understanding like, oh, that's part of the trauma I've experienced, which has allowed the perpetuation of that on my child. Just these are some of my initial thoughts. So I would love for you to share why that would be, and what that might look like.
Yeah.
She had, just as this example for anybody listening.
All those things, yes, to all of those things. I think one of the first things that comes to mind with my mom is that it would have been easier to face. I think like when I was like presenting like I'm being hurt, I think my mom's lens, she couldn't go there.
Yeah.
And like the idea of that was like devastating. So she's like, that absolutely didn't happen. So she couldn't see me. She couldn't hear me. Like she couldn't understand me. And so it was like, it was a wall because it had been built up because of the pain that she was protecting. And I think that if, she had done her work, different time, done her work, I think she would have been like, I need to advocate for this little person because I wasn't advocated for. My mom's mom, she died when I was 10, but she was not mean, but she was a very cold woman. And I don't remember her ever smiling. She was a cold woman. And, I, obviously that shaped my mom, like, and what she saw. And so I think that if my mom had like done her work, she would have been like, stood in her power and been like, absolutely no way is this going to perpetuate this cycle. But instead she chose like to shut down because it was too painful to go there.
Oh, yeah. That's such a great example. I appreciate you sharing that because I think so often we think it stays with us and we don't realize how that really, it doesn't. Like, and it affects our children. It affects the people around us because then we aren't able to speak up and advocate for somebody else because we haven't dealt with our stuff. So it will inevitably impact the people that we love the most. So I love that you shared and expanded on this. I think it's so necessary to hear those examples. I'm wondering, just because I think so many families do avoid talking about painful histories, how does silence impact a child or adolescent's mental health and identity?
I mean, even in stuff that isn't like super deep, like I'll have families, like a kid will tell me something they're really ashamed about. They cheated, they stole something, like something that like doesn't land on the like outrageous scale, right? And so I've been like, we should like, let's talk to mom about it if they're open to that. And because I never like force those kind of conversations. And so I'll say to the mom, so we're talking about something that is actually really tricky. I'm wondering if for you, mom, if there's ever been a time that you've been ashamed of something that you've done. And then like, they'll usually pick up where I'm going. And they're like, yeah, like I was in middle school. I did a thing. And the kid will be like, you did? And so I love creating a bridge of humanity. That it's like, we're all trying to figure it out. And I always tell kids, you haven't done this before. We're all trying to figure it out. And so I think like knowing that the people that you respect are human. And that's a really big part of like my platform is just being like authentic and kids being like, do you think I'm crazy because I'm in counseling? You have a grand therapist. Like, and I started last week. Like, are you kidding? Life's hard. So I think like breaking down like the images and the facades are so important to feel like for people to feel human because it's hard.
Oh man, that's so good. I could only imagine how much breakthrough happens for families when you do ask those questions because what I really love, and this stood out even when I listened to a podcast you were on previously, is how you talked about parents being human, which I'm like, yeah, thank you for saying this because it's fine. That's kind of something I hope my kids will say, not just like, oh, she's a great mom. It's like, I'm human. Like I will mess up, as scary as that is. I'm going to do my best to like not try to not like wreck them, but like, I also know the reality is that's part of being human. I've never done this before. They have never done this before. They're kids, but like just getting to connect on the human level, on that heart to heart and being like, hey, I struggled with this too, where there's less isolation, less shame because they're not thinking what's wrong with me. My parents never messed up. I also am thinking about conversations I've had with friends who have kids and they're like, oh man, the stuff that I did, I don't ever want to, I don't know. Do I tell my kids? Do I not? And it's like, well, I think obviously there's like developmental ages that are appropriate for that stuff. But I do appreciate hearing the kid who, in this example, a kid who's in middle school and maybe they did cheat on a test or they stole, and hearing from their parent, like, okay, I did that too. And it's not permissible, but like, these are some of the things of what makes us human, and we can connect in our humanity.
Totally. Yeah. Like, because parents like always call me or say an intake, like, I think I wrecked my child. Well, first off, you're human. So, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm like, this is like significant what you're doing, that you actually care about their mental health. That's a lot better than our previous generation. We know better, do better. And so I think I had a like middle schooler that was like miffed about their mom like not getting some of their like pronouns and identity right. Give the lady a break. She's trying.
Yeah.
You know, like I get that like you don't appreciate XYZ, but my mom would never care about that kind of thing. And
Yeah.
so just cut them some slack.
Right. And what have you seen when you are in the room with the parent or and the child where you get to have those conversations? Do you see like there's breakthrough or relief? What shift do you notice happens in each person when they get to have that conversation?
Well, it's like really important to me to be the bridge because I don't go home with them, right? And so like I don't want to create like a family counseling scenario where everybody's like raw and open. Then I'm like, bye, see you Thursday.
Yeah.
And so I think that like it's just enough like to start those kind of conversations, like within my office, and that kids are like, I really just want to be heard. I have one kid that tells me this is the only place she can go where she's not interrupted. And I think like some of that particular one, I have some parents that bring a kid to me that is the sibling of perhaps more challenging kid. And I respect that so much because they're just like, this kid's basically on fire and we don't want to miss anything because this one is not a squeaky wheel. And so I see those kids that like have so many things that they just suppress because they see like chaos over here. And so I'd like to facilitate those conversations. Use a talking ball, like have a squishmallow, don't throw it too hard at each other. You hold the squishmallow and then you say like what you need them to hear. And I think in those kind of scenarios, parents are like, I'm so glad you told me because like I've been busy over here. And they're like, I know.
Wow.
So I think that that's kind of huge for the first time to be heard and not interrupted. And learning is a common thing I hear.
Gosh, I could imagine that's like a much more common and deeper need than what we even realize. It's just the space for the child to be able to share whatever it is, and not for us as the parent to jump in to fix and rescue. But really, I feel like that's also part of where we have to do our own work on the emotions that come up, the fear or whatever just hit a wound that we haven't dealt with, that then causes to be like, it's too much, it's scary, like I need to jump in, shut this down, fix. But then what they need, we miss the connection, we miss their heart, and it creates more of a divide between us.
Yeah. And like, I'm like thinking of one in particular about connected to adoption, and like, big feelings come up, especially with like the holidays just passing, big feelings come up. And, and like, I just like to name it, like, and so I like said in front of the kid and the mom, adoption like is beautiful and it's also really painful, but both are true. And so like the kid is hearing me validate the mom too, like that this is tricky too. And the kid told me later, like, I didn't know that my mom was having a hard time with it as well. I'm like, and lots of things can be true at the same time. And that is true in so many things, right? Like that's new.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I actually really love that example that you brought up. Because in these conversations, both people can be heard. But I think so often, especially as the adult, being able to create the space for your child, it helps to soften your heart. And then there's more opportunity to get to connect in these deeper ways that we really probably haven't been able to for a while, if at all. What have some of those experiences been with high risk and suicidal teens? And what have they taught you about what young people need most from the adults in their life?
Yeah, I'm like thinking about this really strongly today because I was at a concert last night. Dean Lewis, I don't know, he's from Australia.
How fun.
But yeah, and he shared about, 'cause this is a rescheduled tour because he got sick, and it turns out he was in rehab. And he's like, I wrote this song while in rehab, and it's like called like Seconds After the Sunrise. And it's about holding on and like that. So he's like, if anyone needs to hear this, I'm probably going to make a post about it. But I was just like, I'm thinking strongly about it because I'm like, how many people in that audience? It was in a massive location. But how many people like desperately needed to hear hope?
Yes.
And so I think that that's what like I tried to do in a smaller scale here. Because, you know, like I wrote about suicidality in my book. I wrote about trying to unalive myself when I was 14. And spoiler alert, I wasn't successful. Here we are.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there is hope. And I think that a lot of our kids, our teenagers are having existential crises because the world's on fire. They're seeing too much because the access like 24/7 to the internet, they're seeing too much. And I think hope is lacking in a lot of our kids. And I think, sometimes kids, they can't see very far. And so they're like, everything's the worst. My parent like thinks that XYZ, which is usually not true. And it spirals. And so I think I try to stop the spiral in here.
Yeah, that's really good. I know. I feel like you probably know the stats of where teens are at as far as depression, anxiety, and suicide because they have just skyrocketed. So much of what you've talked about contributes to that. But getting to have a front row seat and working with teens in those spaces, I feel like that reality is very real for you.
Well, one of my best friends, Carolyn, which I'm sure who will listen to this, she is the current like director of an organization, a nonprofit here called Second Wind Fund, and it's Colorado specific, and their mission is to provide uninsured and underinsured suicidal kids free counseling. And so I've been a provider for them, and like you agreed to see kids like for this amount of time at a lower rate. And there has not been a suicide connected since they started. It's been like, years and years. And so, you give them a survey that it's anonymous, the 1st, the 5th, and the 12th session. And it's basically for people to give funding to see suicidality goes down with treatment.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's amazing. And so you're just like, here, you're connected to a number. Nobody knows who you are. I need you to fill out this 20 question thing. And like, you see the numbers, like you see it like go down, and you're just like, that's from like 4 sessions. You just need someone to hear you.
Yes.
Like, it takes away the darkness for someone to be present with you and be like, I see you, I hear you. And like it does get better, and I'm living proof.
Right. Because, what I'm thinking, I mean, that is staggering. Staggering to see an organization who specifically is tailored to help teens who are suicidal. And then to have the statistics and the measurements to be able to tangibly measure and say there has not been one suicide linked since providing these services. Is incredible because I feel so often that alone can feel very big. And it's like, oh my gosh, in a way where it's like, what do we even do about it? And yet you're part of an organization that is actively doing something about it and the numbers are going down. Why do you think that is?
Yeah. Well, yeah. And it's sad on one hand, but I'm glad they're getting support on the other. But I got an 8-year-old client from Second Wind Fund, from a Second Wind Fund referral,
Wow.
a suicidal 8-year-old.
That is so young.
I know it is so young. And, someone was saying to me that like, it's really sad. And I'm like, I actually see it as like really hopeful because it's the kids that aren't talking that I'm worried about. You know,
yes.
These kids have said something to someone, like they got a referral from a school counselor, a pastor, somebody like that opened up that door. And then you can walk through it. Cause if you hear in the news, the kids, they're like, she was star of all these things. And like, we had no idea. Those are the kids, like, that's terrifying.
It
But
is.
it's like an 8-year-old telling me the darkness they feel. Like, you're not going to be a 16-year-old, like, trying to perform like I did.
Exactly. Yeah. And what's really standing out to me and hearing you talk about this is you mentioned it earlier. It's how they need someone to hear them. They just needed to share and find a safe space to share, and not someone who will freak out or tell them they're wrong or any of that, but just to share. Because I know, and I've like talked about this before, but I did, I've struggled with some suicidal ideation at one point, and I remember so much of that was because I couldn't figure it out then. But now, as I've been able to look back, I'm like, no, so much of it was because I felt like I had to carry the weight of all that in. I couldn't share. It was terrifying. And I knew, I was like, I don't actually want this and build because I was terrified of it. I didn't know what to do with the fear. I didn't know what to do with these thoughts. And I didn't feel like I could find someone safe enough to share honestly. But then eventually, when it got so big and scary, I was like, okay, I don't want this. I need help. And then just being able to have the safe person present who didn't flinch when I would like share some of the darkness, that was what I needed. And it helped me to feel less alone, less like all the shame tapes that go on with that. And I think we don't realize we're in such a productive culture, this like do, perform, perfect. We miss, and what we need as humans is presence, somebody's presence without an agenda, being like, this is part of reconnecting humanity as a person. That is what is, I feel like, the medicine for our hearts and our mind. That's what, for us as humans, we need that so bad, but it's not very valued in our culture.
Oh, for sure. Well, yeah, because everyone's like so busy, and they're just like, I can't talk. Like, when do I have time to talk to my mom? We go from soccer practice to this to that. And like, I'm like, but the thing is, if we don't talk about the things that are hard, you're not going to make it to soccer practice. That's just the reality of the matters. You can stuff it for a long time until you can't.
Yes, exactly. Because it's almost like a volcano that's going to erupt at some point. You just
Yeah.
keep it down and it will eventually come out. But I'm thinking too of what you've talked about as far as creating real safety, not just saying the right thing, but being a safe person. What does this type of emotional safety look like in parenting?
I mean, and I think it's really hard because parents try so hard and it's an impossible job. I think that it's hard to not feel defensive because a lot of times, so you know how it works in therapy for like listeners is that unless you tell me that you're going to hurt yourself, someone's hurting you, it stays here. But how I work with kids and teens is I say, like, I tell them that caveat and I tell both of them on both sides, like, your parents going to want to know what's happening. So I'll tell them either something I said, something we did, a strategy we're trying, but I won't quote you. And that's how I keep everyone happy. So, and that was part of like in thinking about writing my book, that like I hear a lot of repeated things. And what I hear a lot is when I'm like, hey, maybe we should bring that up to mom. I think and it doesn't fall in those categories, but it's sort of gray. And they'll be like, no. And what I hear over and over and over and over is kids say, no, because my mom will say, oh, fine, because I'm just the worst parent ever. And we'll like shut down and then they'll slam a door. And I cannot tell you how many times I've heard that. And so I think that it's hard when you are like feeding your kid and like, trying to get them the best things and like, shipping them to all of their activities. I think that it's hard to hear like, this is what like is not landing well for me.
Yeah.
And like it can feel like a slap in the face, like, oh, well, but, and so I think to try to like own that defensiveness and take that down to be like, my kid is just giving me feedback again as a human parent that I am doing the best that I can. And so I would say like to work on that like defensive posture, that it's like, and it's not saying the kid's even right, but like that it's like, okay, this is how you're experiencing this family. That's how you're experiencing the world. And like knowing that like you're trying your best, but not presenting to them in a way that's going to make them be like, well, then in the future, if I can't tell you that I don't like it when you do little X, I'm certainly not going to talk to you about big X.
Yeah, that's a great example as well, because it is very easy to jump to that as a parent. And so much of it too, it's like, well, hearing that from your kid, when if you are just like, I really am trying to do my best here. And the struggle can be like, I already feel like I'm not doing enough. Ultimately, I am not enough. And then hearing that kind of feedback, it can hurt, which from the hurt, we get defensive, and it just creates the whole cycle. And then the child shuts down. They're like, oh, well, I guess this doesn't work, and then we take on the shame. So it's like, I'm just the worst mother ever. That's not true. But what happened in you? Again, kind of coming back to like how important it is to do your own work so that you can learn how to be a safe person for your child and be like, what was it about what was said that really triggered this in me?
Right. And that's why it's important, I think, as parents to have like, people that are considered their safe community, that they can other like parent friends that they can be like, can you get a load of this? And like they'd be like,
yeah,
after, and that like you can like appropriately vent to your friends. Be like, are you kidding me with this kid?
yes, oh my gosh.
Not saying that like it's good for people to be like, you're right, my child. I shall do the thing. Because like it's impossible. Like parenting is the hardest job ever. And
right.
and watching that, like I have the easy job. Like I get to support and be fun and then be like, bye. I don't deal with your bedtime or mealtime. So
yeah, exactly. We have like an hour in here and then you're off. Okay.
Bye.
Yeah, it is true. I actually haven't really heard people talk about how important it is as a parent to have your own support system in the way of being able to take, because again, if we feel angry or we're like, what the heck was that? Like, we can channel that to people that we can like offload this to, and it doesn't need to be our kid. And just to work through and be like, was there any validity in that? Or was it, not so that we're just permissive with everything that our kid says, but we have sounding boards, we have people to be able to help navigate this with, which helps us show up and stay, like just show up so much better and kind of, stay engaged with our kids.
For sure. It's literally the whole old oxygen mask, put it on, breathe. We need to breathe.
Exactly. So on the topic of all these things that we've been discussing, one of the things that, we've heard time and time again is how you just can't take someone where you're not willing to go yourself, which is so true. We know that in therapy. And so for the parents in this place where they're like, hey, they're trying to like help their kids indirectly, right? They're like, I haven't dealt with my own stuff, but I want them to go further than I have. Well, we know that they can't. It's like in the ways that they're probably really wanting. So how does a parent's healing directly impact their child's emotional world? I don't know if you've seen any examples of that.
Yeah. Like the first thing that I thought of, there's a chapter in my book called #Get Your Own, Stacy. And then the subtitle is like doing your inner work. Because my publisher was like, people can't read hashtags. They can though. And so we compromise by doing subtitle. So it's doing your own inner work. But that title comes from a kid yelling that at a parent in my waiting room. And the parent was like, definitely not coming from a healthy place, what they were saying. And the kid's like, get their own, Stacy. They did not, in fact, get their own, Stacy. But like the kid had, because our kids today, they're just coming in hot with more language. They're more equipped. Schools have social emotional learning. They're getting a lot more than previous generations. And so this kid, who was at the time 8, could see, dude, you need to benefit from your own therapist, not mine, but you need to get your own, because they already saw like the importance of having a safe place and like sorting their stuff out and like it being easier than when they left. And so, parent did not, in fact, get their own, Stacy, but I think, parents have told me, like, one mom told me with, like, reading my book that it made her realize she needed to get her own support because it was activating stuff. And so I think the more work we do, like, the more it benefits everybody that is connected to us. The more that I show up in therapy, the like more grounded and integrated I am, the better like I can be present for my clients. That I'm not like caught in the mire of my own stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. I think it's very easy. It's easier to focus on our kids and be like, hey, I'm going to set all these appointments and these things up for you to go do your stuff. It's easier to do that in a way and be like, oh, they're the problem. Like, I don't want to look at my stuff because of any X, Y, and Z reason. But really, when they can get the help and we get our help, that's when so much change and transformation can happen. So I'm glad that you've spoken to this, and I'm so grateful for this conversation. As we are coming to a close, can you share where people can connect with you to learn more?
Yes. So I'm guessing it'll be in the show notes because there's 8 million ways to spell my name. But it is stacyschaffer.com. Stacy with no E.
Yes, this
Schaffer,
will be in the show notes.
Yes, stacyschaffer.com. And on my website, can put in their email address and get the first chapter of my book for free. So when they put that in, and awesome. So then there's a link, my book, which is on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and Spotify, which, me doing the audiobook. And so if you like this voice, there's 7 hours of it.
That's awesome. I'm really glad that you did do your own audio.
Me too.
And I told me earlier it was here in Nashville, which is where I live. So I'm glad you got to come out here and do it. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. It was a shout out to Nashville Audio Productions. One of the very best experiences of my life. And I went to the Grand Ole Opry when I was there. So that was like so fun. And, you know, I definitely think a second book, going to happen, and I will use them again. They're wonderful. But I love Nashville. I loved it.
It's a fun city. I love it's like one of my favorite places, which is why I live here. So that's so awesome. Well, I'm so glad you have so many great resources available in so many different ways. And I'll be putting that in the show notes as well, making sure that your name is spelled correctly. So can find you, which is necessary.
Thank you. I'm on Instagram as Hope Restored. And so I'm like some content that is hopefully beneficial, like too, so people can follow me on Instagram.
Oh, good.
Hope Restored.
Okay, great. Okay, I'll be adding that as well. I try to do socials and website, anything else. So it makes it easy for people. Well, thank you so much, Stacy, for being here and having this conversation. I've really enjoyed it and appreciate your honesty and just sharing your experience and stories. It's been really insightful. So thank you.
Yay, thank you for having me. I had a good time.
Great. Well, if this conversation encouraged you, please share it with a friend who needs to hear it. And remember that you're not alone. Thanks so much for listening, friend. I cannot wait to talk with you next time. Thanks for listening to Let's Get Real. If you've been feeling stretched thin, stuck in survival mode, or like you've lost yourself in motherhood, I made something just for you. It's called the Overwhelmed Mom's Guide, and it's totally free. Inside, I walk you through simple steps to help you reconnect with who you are, find a bit more breathing room in your day, and start to feel like you again. You can grab it now. Just click the link in the show notes. You don't have to keep doing this alone. Let's take the next step together.